Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a closer look at that recent live broadcast from Krzysztof Jackowski. The Wyjeo przecena one from his YouTube channel.
Right, and for this deep dive, it's important to remember the source. It's quite unique, isn't it? We're dealing with his feelings and visions about what might be coming, not really hard data or analysis.
Exactly. So our goal isn't about saying, yes, this will happen or no, it won't. It's more about unpacking the themes, the things he keeps coming back to, and trying to understand what they might suggest.
Makes sense. We want to see what patterns emerge, what stands out.
Okay, so first big thing that jumped out at me, his comments on Donald Trump and the U.S. dollar. He had this really strong feeling, didn't he?
He did, about Trump either planning or maybe already doing some kind of major panic buying, and he tied it directly to the dollar.
Which makes you think, okay, what's the context there? Why would that be happening?
Well, you could speculate, couldn't you? Maybe shifts in global trade, other countries looking at different currencies. That could certainly put pressure on the dollar, theoretically.
Right, and he suggested the U.S. might react, try to prop it up by buying back dollars to stop a loss of confidence, basically.
But, and this is key, he still sees a big drop coming. A przecena, he called it.
Yeah, a deprecation dolara, meaning its value falls against other currencies. He even mentioned the current rate, like 3.74 to the dollar.
And compared it to how high it was before, like 4.7, even 4.90 sometimes.
So even with intervention, he thinks the value's heading down significantly.
That seems to be the feeling.
I
Yeah,
see,
like the underlying market forces or global sentiment might just be too strong for buybacks alone to counter completely.
Which kind of leads into his next big point, this looming a crash.
Not just anywhere, though. Specifically a crash zakotnich I Ameriki. So focusing on the Western countries and the U.S.
And here's where it gets, well, pretty intense. He raised the idea that this crash might not be accidental.
Right, sztucznie wyjątkowy, he said. Artificially induced. And maybe even linked to hybrid warfare. Watching hybridoage.
Hybrid warfare.
Yeah.
So not necessarily troops on the ground, but maybe like economic attacks, cyber stuff.
Could be. It's a broad term. Things aimed at destabilizing economies without direct military action. That's certainly one interpretation you could take.
He even laid out stages for it, like 3 phases, a big drop in asset values first.
And then a freeze on people's assets, which sounds, well, quite drastic.
Definitely. And he also made that claim about 2008 that the financial crisis back then wasn't just bad luck, but actually planned.
Which is, a pretty provocative perspective on how major economic events might happen, suggests a level of orchestration.
Did he give a time frame for this potential new crash?
He mentioned a window, sort of mid-June, maybe around the 16th, running through to the end of August.
Okay.
But he was careful, wasn't he? Said it was a feeling, a period of heightened risk, not a definite locked-in prediction.
Gotcha. Important distinction.
Okay.
Okay, so shifting topics slightly. He also talked about inflation and the war in Ukraine narrative.
Yeah, he feels like food prices, maybe other things too, are going to start climbing noticeably in July.
Why then?
Possibly linked to external factors, maybe higher inflation than expected after the presidential elections.
Okay, and if you connect that back to the crash idea, rising food costs on top of falling asset values or frozen money.
Exactly. It paints a picture of a really difficult economic squeeze for ordinary people, pressure from multiple sides.
And the war narrative. He thought the talk about Ukraine has died down a bit lately.
He observed that, yeah, and suggested it might be strategic maybe to influence voter turnout.
But he expects it to come roaring back after the elections.
A swift return, yeah. A strong war narrative, potentially pulling several countries deeper into the conflict because, in his view, Putin won't back down.
And he mentioned Poland again there, didn't he?
He did. As one country that might be sort of secretly ready to get more involved.
Which raises questions about NATO dynamics, I guess.
For sure. You could think about potential U.S. pressure on allies. You need to stand up to Russia, or your NATO status might be, well, questioned. He implied something along those lines.
Leading to his concern about future negotiations. U.S., Europe, Russia.
And the potential outcome being that some countries near Russia, Poland mentioned again, could lose some NATO protections, become more vulnerable to Russian influence.
That's a worrying thought. And he brought up 2025 again, too.
The cursed year, yes. He seems to consistently feel that 2025 is going to be pivotal, with significant events happening, adds a layer of, well, anticipation to all this.
Then things got very specific and, frankly, quite alarming. Visions of Beirut.
Yeah, Beirut, Lebanon, attacked, in flames. He specifically noted its closeness to Israel.
And he linked it to European troops potentially going into Ukraine. Like, Beirut gets hit before that happened.
That was the connection he made, yes. Which suggests a potential and really concerning widening of conflict. Ukraine, Middle East, interconnected theaters.
Wow, okay. And then following that, a general sense of danger in Europe, specifically around flying.
Mm-hmm. Increased danger. He even floated the idea that some European countries might actually suspend passenger flights for a time.
Suspend flights. Why?
Fear of aerial attacks was his feeling, which is, again, a massive escalation if you think about it. The disruption would be huge.
Definitely. Okay, and finally, he touched on the environment. Weather.
Yeah, kind of unusual observations. The cold weather in May, where he is, in Chuchel, made him wonder, is someone deliberately cooling regions?
And the sky looking paler.
That too, yeah. Subjective feeling, obviously, but it taps into those wider anxieties people have about environmental changes, whether natural or not.
He also brought up refugees coming into Europe, worries about the impact, lack of consultation.
Right, and that led to a more vague but unsettling feeling. Talk of selection, maybe through manipulating weather or those zinny, smuggy, strange trails in the sky.
Dispersing harmful substances. But hard to track because it affects people individually.
That seemed to be the concern, yeah. Making it difficult to pin down increases in illness or deaths, and this overall feeling of Europe being like an experimental training ground.
Polygonowem, Jusviadzolnim.
Yeah.
Yeah, like potentially unsafe experiments happening.
It's a lot. Wide-ranging anxieties there, covering environment, health, geopolitics, but again, presented as his feelings, his interpretations.
So just to recap the main areas we've touched on, potential dollar problems, this idea of a Western economic crash possibly being planned, the war narrative heating up, specific dangers like Beirut and aviation in Europe, and then these environmental and societal concerns.
Exactly. And it's really crucial, isn't it, to keep stressing these come from his broadcast, his visions and feelings. We're not presenting this as confirmed fact or any kind of advice, financial or otherwise.
Absolutely. It's about understanding the source material. But it does make you wonder, how might these different pieces fit together? Are there underlying connections between, say, economic instability and geopolitical tensions?
That's really the question to ponder, isn't it? If you look at all these disparate points, the dollar, the crash, the war talk, Beirut, the weather, worries what larger picture, what underlying anxieties might they reflect?
Yeah. Given all the uncertainty he describes, these potential huge shifts globally,
Yeah.
it really makes you think about, well, how prepared are we? How well do we understand the forces potentially at play?
Precisely. It's definitely something that encourages you, the listener, to maybe do some more thinking, some more research, and just critically engage with the world around you. Lots to consider.